Okay, so let's go through this activity for human origins. The whole point of the first part was just to show that the primordial pair, or these ideas about how creation came about, is not unique to Christianity. God has communicated with lots of people over time, and lots of people have created different ideas based on their cultural conceptions of how life began. And so we kind of went through a couple of the examples, which are really cool. But the point is that we just don't know, and this is a great quote from the first presidency saying, we're not exactly sure how Adam and Eve got their bodies. And so right now, what we're going to do is just defer to what we can prove using science, what evidence we can gather, I should say. And so we're going to gather evidence of human evolution. And so I asked you to list like pieces of evidence that might help convince you that the human body evolved. And so then we go through several bits of evidence. And so, first of all, the fossil record. Do we have fossils of pre-human hominids or hominins? And the answer is yes, we've got lots of them, and we'll look at them in class. And so then do we know how old they are? Well, sure, we can look several ways. So relative dating is looking at, where it is in the stone layers. And so the older things are going to be in older layers, newer things will be in upper layers. But then we can also do absolute dating. So this walks you through how we do carbon-12 dating. And so I'm actually going to do, let's see, I'll write it down in here. So I'm going to do this problem out. So we have this 10 kilogram piece of bone that has 8 kilograms of carbon in it, and we're pretending that carbon-14 is at a percentage of 1%, which is not true. But that just means that we would be expecting to have 80 grams of carbon-14 in our bone, but what we actually have is 5 grams of carbon-14. So can we estimate age? I'm going to use this space right here to just type what I'm thinking. So we got this 10 kilogram bone, 8 kilograms of which is carbon. And so if carbon-14 is 1%, should be 1%, then we would expect 80 grams of carbon-14. Okay, and so what we actually see 5 grams. So that means that we've had some decay. So basically, let me scroll down a little. Our 80 grams during the first half-life went down to 40 grams, right? During this second half-life went down to 20 grams. Then we have another half-life to 10 grams, and then down to 5 grams. So how many half-lives has it been? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 half-lives. Is that a word? I don't even know. Times, what's the half-life? Well, it's 5,730 years. So that means to get down to 5 grams, it would have had to be 22,920 years has passed, right? So we could tell that this particular bone is 22,920 years old. Okay, so that's just how you figure that out. And then the next piece of evidence we look at is cultural artifacts. Have we found garbage that humans have left behind? It turns out we have. We found lots of tools, and they get gradually more and more advanced as we get closer and closer to humans. And these things do look like just a chipped rock, but they're actually, I'll bring one to class, hopefully, if I can find it. They're very ergonomical. You grab onto them, and they're very good tools. So we know that they were made by humans. And then the genetic system, right? We know that we all use a common genetic code, so that's really good evidence. Here's our phylogeny, so you can see that we branched off from our closest relative, which are the chimpanzees and bonobos. We branched off from them 5 to 7 million years ago. But along this lineage, there's all kinds of hominid creatures that have branched off and that have gone extinct. We're the only ones left alive in our genus. And so I'll bring some of those into class, but when it asks who's our closest relative, well, you follow it up, it's these guys, right? So it's both of them together. And then what I do is I just walk you through some of the different features. Like if we were to pull a skull out of the ground, how do we decide? I mean, because let me go back up here, right? If this is time, starting ancient time to modern day, while humans were evolving, so were chimpanzees and bonobos. And gorillas and orangutans. So we want to know, like when we pull a skull out of the ground, how do we decide it belongs on our lineage and not on one of the other lineages of the primates, right? So we have to know what differentiates us from the other primates. And so we looked at human and chimp skulls just to see when we pull these skulls out of the ground, that's usually what's preserved, right? Because it's the biggest bony part. we look at the differences and see, what is it that makes us uniquely human. And so brow ridges are a big one, right? Although we have brow ridges, our skull is just sitting on top. But you can look for brow ridges. You can look for how elongated the muzzle is. Here I have you look at the foramen magnum, which is the big hole that your spinal cord comes out of, and it's farther back in an organism that walks on all fours. It's closer to the center in an organism that's bipedal, like we are. This one here is looking at foramen magnum. This one here is looking at the shape of the upper jaw. So ours flares out, whereas the chimpanzee's is straight back. And that gives us more tongue manipulation. We also look at the palate. We've got a more domed palate. Theirs is flat. We look at the teeth, right? We've got not the enlarged canines, but our canine root, surprisingly, is actually the same big size, but the canines have been reduced. And then we looked at the nose bone. So the presence of a nose bone, humans have a nose bone, other primates do not. And then we looked at the bottom jaw, and you can see this really thick bone part right here that humans don't have. Instead, we have it on the outside. So we have a chin to strengthen our jaw, and they have what we call a simian shelf to strengthen their jaw, which is right here, that word, simian shelf. And then again, we flare out. Theirs stays straight. And so there's a lot of things we can look at in the skulls to differentiate between which lineage it should be on. Should it be on a monkey type lineage, or should it be on a human type lineage? So that's what you should have gotten out of this activity.